today. So thank you, Ms. Collins.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Okay. Ms. Walker, I have a couple of questions for you. Your first point was to keep in mind our power to shape the market and the consumption habits. And then you talked about I guess there's various degrees of potency of marijuana. And have you found that, I guess there's various potents that are actually being sold in these states, and how do they distinguish, and how do they label it, and who can purchase what?
Well, there isn't any real restrictions on the potency that can be purchased when it comes to the flower in Colorado and Washington. I do know in the medical market, very low potency THC for very specific medical purposes is advertised as such. All marijuana is supposed to be being labeled and tested. That's like the end goal. So the THC content of all your products. I would say the current tax, depending on how you do your tax structure, you favor sort of one thing over the other. If you make the tax based on the weight of the marijuana, breeders are going to breed high THC content marijuana because that's the bigger bang for your buck relative to the tax rate. So that's just one way, what I mean, like shaping the market, keep in mind. In the alcohol industry, we treat all the different types of alcohol with a different tax rate. Hard alcohol has a different tax rate than beer. And within the hard alcohol, because it's based on how much hard alcohol is in there. And so that is just one of those ways that you can shape the market. There's always, outright bans on certain types of products. I know in the alcohol industry, you can't sell 191 alcohol in most states anymore. A lot of states have put the cap at 151. That's sort of like a hard and fast way to shape the market, but that's, is a big issue that there's a lot of things you can do. The United States is very unusual. Marijuana consumers in this country almost never mix their marijuana with tobacco, which is unlike the rest of Europe. And so keeping marijuana and tobacco not sold together in the same facility would be a way of promoting that rather healthy habit. Those are sort of the considerations to keep in mind.
Now, you also mentioned a small limit on non-resident purchases. I'm not sure that it would be permissible or legal to distinguish whether or not you're selling to a
in Colorado,
non-resident.
In Colorado, they currently have that where you can, if you're a Colorado resident, you can purchase up to an ounce, but if you're a non-resident, you can only purchase up to a quarter ounce. And so that's been the rule there for the 10 months now, and they haven't had any problems.
Is that in a single purchase?
Yeah, in a single purchase. If you go into a store, you can only purchase this amount from that store.
Okay. All right, so that's a little different than an outright ban. So at least, a resident and a non-resident can still purchase. They just can purchase in different quantities.
Yeah.
And then it's your testimony that we should allow vertical integration.
Yes. There's a few things to keep in mind. There's one issue that might help the industry relative to tax. There's the issue with the 280E about how, because it's technically a Scheduled 1, they can't get certain business tax deductions. And so vertical integration can help with that, sort of just the way you do the math. But I feel the bigger reason to do that is, if you look at vertical integration in the beer industry, it was very bad for selection. And once they banned tied houses, which they did after Prohibition most places, the number of breweries rapidly disintegrated until we were down to only about 80. And once they started changing those rules, especially on the West Coast, you would allow brew pubs mainly. Before then, you couldn't actually have a brew pub. You couldn't brew beer and then sell it in the restaurant that you were running. We've seen an explosion of breweries since then. And I think if there's going to be any remaining industry in D.C., production industry, because once other states legalize and they're allowed to sell in here, it's just going to be cheaper to grow in other states. And I think only if you have sort of a small artisan market, D.C. lost all its breweries for a lot of years, and it's only recently you got a few brew pubs and local breweries that have returned. Just a long-term consideration, I guess.
And then you said we should consider allowing private clubs or marijuana lounges. Now, do they have that in Colorado?
They do not have that in Colorado yet. There is
How about
some,
Washington?
There is some people who are trying to create private clubs because the laws ban public consumption, so the question is, what is the difference between public and private? And this is a big issue in alcohol. I know in Utah, bars were illegal until 2009, but you would have a private club where you'd go and you'd sign a little membership slip, and then you'd walk in and you'd be in a bar. And that's basically how all bars were run in Salt Lake City for a very long time. So there is no such thing as private and public that can be easily defined. There's like a sliding scale, and you got to basically decide where to draw the line.
Because I know someone testified earlier that tourism went up in Colorado.
Yes.
It was enacted. But now you're saying, well, one issue in Colorado is tourists have no legal place to consume marijuana, but tourism is going up, the sales are up, so.
And it's
They got to get a Rocky Mountain high, I guess, right?
well, and a lot of people are buying edibles because you can't smoke in your hotel room, and edibles are really not. If someone's not experienced with marijuana, edibles are not the best. You know, it doesn't kick
Or
in
they can
right
get
away.
a rookie cookie if they're not.
Well, you could do
Yeah, yeah.
But it is a delayed reaction, so you end up trying to get that high and it's delayed. But there are hotels that are opening that are pro marijuana. They actually had clubs and they closed them. I don't know, right now, we're still just trying to untangle this 10-year-old industry. They may come back. So,
Yeah.
And especially in DC where you have limited retail space, it may be a better option to have it here.
And finally, John, have you done any calculations on what you believe the demand would be in the District of Columbia? and
Well, I
what
can
is-
just give you some back of the envelope figures. Something about like 7% of adults, have consumed marijuana in the past month.
in DC.
No, well, just like nationwide. So that would be something in the neighborhood of 25,000 adults here in DC. If we assume, I know the Colorado study where they're trying to predict the market there, assumed people consume something in the neighborhood of, the average consumer consumed about 3.5 ounces a year, something around like 100 grams. So that's like amongst DC residents. Maybe that's like a rough ballpark figure, something in like the 2.5 million grams, which is not that much. I know the Rand Corporation did a study a long time ago, and they calculated one large farm in Iowa could probably produce enough marijuana for the entire United States. People just don't consume, like the physical quantity of marijuana people consume is not that large. And so I don't think DC would have a problem finding the warehouse space to grow it, especially with the high-intensity indoor operation that would likely be in DC.
Okay, so just rough calculations, it's approximately 25,000 adults in DC, and on average of 3.5 ounces per year, that would produce, we need to produce about 2.5 million grams? Is that what you?
Yeah, that's math I was doing right when I was listening to you guys, so.
And in order to actually produce 2.5 million grams, how much land would be needed? Or I guess what I'm hearing also, it could be inside of a warehouse.
I know the Washington did a study, and they estimated that it was something like 40 grams per square foot per harvest, in 4 harvests a year. So that's 160 grams per square foot of grow area. So I think if you did those numbers, you would come up to something in the neighborhood of like 16,000 square feet to provide just local residents, not assuming tourists would probably increase that number. You need to produce more, but that's not a large amount of space.
It's not a large amount at all, and it goes back to what Dr. Wallach was saying, that we need to be in the forefront of a flood of applications for a very limited amount of production that would be needed to supply, 25,000 to 40,000 residents. That was fine. Okay. Mr. Nelson, thank you for coming down. Now, I know we've met before. Are you in the entertainment business as well?
I was at the cable company back in the day.
Right, okay. Good. Well, thank you very much for coming down and
One thing I
testifying.
just thought I'd add, Rand's doing a study of Vermont, which is planning to move forward with legalization, and it should be coming out in January 1st, roughly. And since it's the same population size as DC, that might be very helpful.
Okay.
Deciding the number of licenses, consumer base type of thing
Good.
for you guys.
Thank you very much for your testimony here today.